Welcome to, we'll call it the Growth Marketing Podcast still. Today, we're going to talk all about how brands can do research and what we do to really leverage research upfront to have better site copy, ad creative, performance in general for brands out there when it comes to scaling. So, Toby, what questions you got? Let's dive in here.
Yeah, this is more your realm here, so I'll leave most of the conversation up to you. But I get asked a lot of questions from brand owners around this topic, and I'm never able to fully lay out exactly what our team does because there's so much that we go into such depths that ultimately spit out so many new ideas for us to explore when it comes to working with brands. So tell me, when we start working with a brand, or what advice would you give a brand that's looking to, I guess, start a research piece from scratch to ultimately come up with new ideas, new angles, and just help with their current ad performance? What would you suggest is a good starting point for them?
Yeah, I think we do a lot up front, and I think honestly our process could be stolen pretty easily, used really nice for brands that are out there. I think the first part is kind of what the phase of the company or brand is. If it's new, you're going to have a lot less data from current customers, potentially to leverage, which we use a lot in our process, which is really cool. I guess I can talk about just our entire process real quick, and then we can get into what does that look like for like newer brands versus more established brands too. But sort of our process initially, when we start working with a brand, we'll have them fill out a form. In that form, they'll kind of say, why do people buy from you? What sets you apart? Who are your competitors? And basically we'll gather a lot of this data and we'll pull that out and extrapolate it, and we'll put it kind of into we basically just have a Google worksheet. And then from there, we'll list out all those competitors. From each of those competitors, we'll look at kind of how they are in the market. Are they, like the high-end brand? Are they like the lower price, like Walmart of the market, trying to just be the lowest price out there and compete on margin a lot? Are they just totally different and sort of an outlier and sticking out? Or are they all like looking the same? Or are they not, So we'll dive into competitors, we'll look at their sites, we'll look at their offers and see what those look like. Again, are they all the same across the industry? Is someone doing something completely different? And then we'll look kind of high level. I look at it with a grain of salt, but we'll look at social media followings too, like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. And I really like to look at really just like what's the size of the following and what's the engagement like there. Is it something like maybe they purchase followers, or maybe they're spending a ton of money on ads and it's just naturally big from that? Or is there something actually going on there that we need to pay attention to? Like what is working? What kind of community maybe have they established? So that's really looking at competitors up front. And then from there too, we'll look at from those followings, who has the biggest, where does our brand that we're working with kind of sit in that market, which I think is a really good picture of what's going on. How does it look? Is anyone even standing out? If not, okay, cool. We can maybe tell this brand we can push in this direction or try this offer that's completely different to stand out from the noise a bit more, which is really nice. That's the whole competitive landscape that we kind of do. I said it pretty quickly in a nutshell, but that's sort of it in the main part of it. The other side of it, I guess, too, is we'll look at the websites and see kind of what they offer, right? So does our brand have multiple SKUs? Is it one SKU? Are the other brands that have, ventured into other categories or products? And what does that look like? Is it working? And then another thing we'll do too is we'll try to pull like top selling products. If they have Shopify UTMs that are URL parameters that aren't like custom, we might be able to do like sort by, all collections, bestsellers, and then see like what is the top selling product out of a bigger selection of SKUs, which is really cool. So that again is the whole competitive landscape. What's it look like? What are the top sellers? Are they standing out? Are they not? What's the offers? All that kind of stuff, which is really good. That kind of then shows us where's that brand in kind of that entire market. The other big part is what are we going to say? How do we stand out from that? Why do people love our brand or our products? And yeah, what's the pain points? What's the benefits? Who are our demographics, that kind of thing. From that, we'd love to dive into a lot of review research. Again, if you're new versus established, it's very different. If you're new, you have no reviews. So this is like a lot different. What I recommend there and what we often do there, or even like some of our brands, they might have a new product completely and they just have no reviews on a new product launch. So what I like to do is see like, is this an original product? Is it similar to something else? If it is similar, what we can do is we can go into Amazon, we can go to these other sites of competitors that might have these products, and we can scrape reviews, or we'll look at Amazon high level at some of their review data. Now they're getting really good at sorting a lot of this stuff. So before we would manually look at Amazon and pull manual reviews, like copy paste them into a sheet and then weigh out like what are their pain points, what are the benefits that are being mentioned. Now Amazon's really good and they kind of use AI and leverage reviews, and they kind of make it green or gray or red. So they kind of naturally tell you really quick above reviews, like what's the things that people love about it? What are things that people might not like about it? So we were doing that all manually way before. And now it's like, you can just go and find these things like really quickly, which is awesome. So that's if you're, and I still would recommend that honestly, if you're established too, it's really good to look at what are people saying about your competitors, especially if it's something like, we're selling jackets or something, let's say they're waterproof jackets, and our competitors, like people are like, the zippers are tough. And we know like our brands maybe like have figured out how to make that zipper better. Like that's something we can leverage a bit more in copy angles and whatnot, and us versus them comparisons. So that's really what I like using that for. The other side of it is if you are established, you can pull all of your reviews, and from those, we use a lot of like ChatGPT AI stuff now. We used to manually pull reviews and read through like at least 100 and basically pull out like what are very specific use cases. Even if it's like, I'm a military vet, I retired, 5 years ago, I injured my back and then I got this or heard about this, like very specific stuff we'll start to write down. And then we'll look for patterns too with that. And like I said, now we'll use ChatGPT that can kind of help us with that too. So we can upload pretty big amounts of reviews and tell ChatGPT, pull out demographics that we're seeing here, pull out common use cases, pull out pain points that people are mentioning, find top benefits that people are mentioning from these reviews. And then from there too, we'll kind of weigh it out. So what's the number one benefit? What's the number one pain point? And then we'll kind of, with brands that we work with that form that we have, does it line up? Is it off? And I think it's really, really nice to do this even internally for a company. If you're not working with an agency, like write out, what do you think people are buying your products for? Like, what is the reason? What's the benefit? What's the pain point? What do you think is that demographic before you even pull it up on, Google Analytics or in your Shopify dashboard or whatever? Like try to guess what your audience is and just see. And like a lot of brands are pretty good at this. If you're new, kind of the same thing. It's still good practice. Like try to figure out what that benefit is, what's that benefit? What's that pain point? And what is that demographic that you're going after? And then when you're doing this competitor analysis, you're doing the review analysis, you can start to see, is that matching up? And I love doing this with our brands that we work with. Does it match up with what they thought it was? The other side of that too is all of the copy on your site might be geared towards a certain, angle or pain point or benefit or demographic again. And now you have all this research that's showing you, 80% of people are buying it for this benefit. Is that the number one benefit that's now on your site or in the product page description, or in the benefits, little bullet points or whatever on your product page? Are you kind of matching things that you're finding in research with the site? So I think that's huge. And a lot of times we can get pretty easy unlocks there of just like, people are just saying the third top reason why people love their products is like the number one thing on the site. And that might be the main USP of the homepage or something, when it really should be this other thing.
That's an interesting point. It's so often we have a conversation with brands initially and their idea of what might resonate is quite different to what we find in our research. But also the point you made of unestablished brands or products leveraging tools like the AI on Amazon. But it's a worthwhile exercise to do even for established brands, looking at those competitive reviews and leveraging maybe their flaws or their blind spots within your copy, whether it be creative, us versus them, or the copy that you leverage. So I definitely think established or non-established, doing this review research for your own reviews to understand your own customers, but also to understand your competitors' strengths and maybe blind spots as well. Would you recommend, obviously this is something that we do for the brands that we work with, and brands can do themselves upfront when we first onboard them. Would you encourage this to be like an ongoing thing that maybe you do every month, every quarter, every 6 months? What would you suggest there?
Yeah, I think there's multiple parts of all of this. I think if you're not using like a post-purchase survey, like No Commerce, for example, I think they still have a free plan. I think it's 3 free questions if they change it. But before it was very like relatively affordable too, like compared to most SaaS tools. Like use a tool like No Commerce right away and add that. And you're getting more data anyway as things continue to progress. We've leveraged them really well for certain clients where they just don't know what to make next for customers. And that can easily be a question. Once someone buys from you, what do you want to see from us next? And now boom, you have like a product pipeline that you can start building out, or iterations that you can start making on products. So I think that can be a really good part of it that can like progress things along. The other side of it too is I think I was writing a tweet about this the other day. I think not enough brand owners and founders and even like operations people are like talking to current customers. And I think that's another huge part of this too, that we haven't really touched on too much. But I think it's one of those things where the more you're in tune with people that are buying from you, just the better it's going to be in the future. One of our clients is really smart about this and really good about it. He rolls out new apparel products and he instantly knows, because he's in communication with people and sees like post-purchase survey data, what people love, what people hate about it, what they want next in the next version of the product. And then he makes like generation 2, generation 3, and each of those along the way has those improvements, which I think is huge. I think the other side of it too, and what we do continuously with brands too, is we'll look at all this data. There's other parts too we haven't touched on, but like Facebook groups can be another huge area. Ad comments can be another huge area. But along the way too, you can, if you're launching like a new product, again, you can do that research phase. Again, like what is the market for this product? What am I seeing on Amazon? What am I seeing with those competitors? So I do think it should be kind of redone every once in a while. It really depends on what the brand's doing though, what the product pipeline looks like. If you're one SKU brand, I definitely encourage you to get more SKUs because that can quickly fizzle out if it's just one. But if you're constantly in the know, even if you have one SKU, then maybe that Gen 2 product can be that improvement from that Gen 1, right? So I think you just, the key here is just be in really good communication with your customers and really understand how they're feeling about what you're doing and what they want next from you, and like work on that. I remember back in the day, like just working on personal brand stuff, some of the like greatest advice I heard was like build your personal brand even if you don't have a product yet. And if you're putting out tons of value, people are going to start saying, oh, you should do this or you should do that, and then boom, there's your product. Likewise, if you're a brand and you're selling 1 or 2 SKUs, keep talking to people in your customer base and they're going to kind of tell you what they want next, and then you can leverage that and kind of put that into the product pipeline moving forward.
Yeah, nice. I suppose it depends on volume as well, right? If you're not getting so many reviews, it might not be as worthwhile, or you might not get as good value from it doing it on a monthly basis. But if you're getting significant amount of reviews, it could be a very regular process for you. CS tickets are very good for that as well. If you get a high volume of CS tickets, understanding those and doing a similar exercise to what we suggested with the reviews, but with those CS tickets, especially if you're a CS team, that's invaluable information. Yeah, no commerce, we pretty much all of our clients leverage that, and it's fantastic, right? For many different reasons, like product pipeline, attribution, it can be great. Yeah, seeing why people bought, who they bought for possibly, and that's a whole new angle generator. Okay, so we've got competitor research when it comes to more like organic socials and just their presence online. We've got review research, which we kind of went on a bit of a segue there.
Yeah, and it's definitely, as people can probably start to realize, it's definitely a rabbit hole that we go down. I mean, it's a week, sometimes 2 week of a process where we have like 4 or 5 people on our team really diving down into these different areas. The other one that comes to mind, I guess, is creative. So we'll do that. A process I heard from one of Nick Shackelford's Geek Outs events is there's an agency, they basically get all the competitors, and we started doing this now and I love doing it. Get all your competitors and then go to their ad library. And we have a Google Sheet, and we can probably even share this with someone if you want access to this, just comment below and we can give you access to that sheet. It's very like straightforward. But another thing you can do from that competitor list is we basically have a column where you link everyone's ad library. And then the next step is we click on all of those ad library links, we pull them up, and we basically make slides and say, what are all of the concepts that each of these companies is doing, right? So it could be like lifestyle shots. Like, what are those lifestyle shots? Is it people like partying on the beach? Is it someone taking a selfie in front of the mirror that they're using as an ad? Is it a UGC that's like at a soccer field, whatever that is? We'll get like the high level concept and put those all like one concept per slide. And then we'll put, if there's 3 competitors that are doing all the same thing, we'll just put those same screenshots on, that slide concept. So that's really cool too, because we're doing that research on what are brands doing? What are we seeing? Again, common patterns for what might be gaps that we're not seeing, which is really cool. Another thing you can do with that too, is you can compare even like UGC, like a lot of review apps now are really cool. You can just attach a photo. Are brands in your market leveraging those photos? And what does those look like? Are you standing out from those competitors' concepts? And can you leverage those? So we look at that, like with brands that we onboard, what's their creative like folders look like? What does the images look like? We'll do, and I didn't really touch on this at all. We'll do a pretty deep dive into the Facebook ad account and the Google ad account as well. And we'll look at what have they tested? What haven't they tested, right? So have they done like very polished looking brand stuff only? Have they done UGC? Have they done, gifts or carousel ads or product catalogs and things like that? And again, we'll look at those gaps and see what we might need to test kind of moving forward. I want to touch too on the review side of things too, because there's another like interesting thing I'll notice and something to call out here. There's multiple different like biases that you might see, which is interesting. One of them is if your brand is constantly saying they're the comfiest XYZ product or something, you might see the reviews and the benefit. Like the number one thing might be it's the comfiest XYZ XYZ, right? So that's one of the things to keep in mind too, is sometimes your brand and your messaging, and that's fine if it's like totally like shifting people in that direction and then the review says that, it's probably still like lined up and connected there. But what we might see sometimes, and this is what I love doing, like our initial test is like, once we find those top pain points, top benefits, let's now test these with like bold static type of ads, because you can whip those up really quick with images, whatever that top pain point or benefit was, put that as like the text overlay on that image with a nice product shot, and just see like, does number one actually perform the best, or does number two, or does number three? Because sometimes you might see the comfiest XYZ that you put on everywhere on your site and you try it on an ad, just doesn't resonate. And you can go down the rabbit hole too of like, was the creative good enough? Did it, amplify that message well enough or not? But often you can kind of see maybe number two is better than number one when it actually comes to like driving the needle and testing it and showing it to people in the public. In that example, like the comfiest XYZ, I feel like people like hear that all the time, or, it feels like you're barely wearing anything, or like, it's breathable or whatever. Like there's so many of these common phrases that you might hear people say in reviews, and it's just saturated. It's a very saturated like angle that then when you test it, it just doesn't do it as well. It doesn't perform as well. So that's another thing just to note there. There's a few biases that you might see and a few things you might test that then when you actually run an ad with it, it's just not performing as well as you thought. So then we just kind of work our way down and go to like, all right, what's the second thing? What's the third thing? Or like look at, did we just not, amplify it and illustrate it well enough in that creative? So you got to think about that too and analyze the data there. That makes sense. A lot there. Yeah.
There are so many offcuts that we could go on in this conversation, and they would all be an hour long each. But I think to like really consolidate this topic of how do brands effectively conduct some research that allows them to ultimately increase overall performance and give them a ton of new ideas to test.
I'm excited. This is like my bread and butter here. I love this stuff. I think the biggest thing I always tell people with all of this, and I think the biggest point of all of it is, as an agency and as a brand, when you're starting to run ads, you shouldn't really just be guessing up front. And I think this is the biggest part that some people rush. And I would say definitely take your time, like go down the rabbit hole, like really dive into kind of your market, your competitors, communities that are out there, those Facebook groups that I mentioned, and see what people are talking about, how they're talking about it, and really leverage that for ads. Because this is just honestly saving you money down the line. Like this is like very smart about even creative that we're doing. So it's really like, we're not guessing up front. Like we have like really good hypotheses from all this data, and then we're testing it. So it's just saving you time, saving you money, resources, all of that. I think that's the main point here.
Community side is a really interesting one, and it's something that we have come to value a lot. When a lot of our brands, yes, they have social followings, but a number of brands that we've onboarded recently have like very large Slack communities or Discord communities, which is a goldmine, a treasure trove of like valuable information, and we get added into that as a normal user, and we just kind of like stand by and just see the conversation develop and what questions are asked and see what people kind of talk about and how they describe the products. And that's just such a valuable tool for brands to have. Again, it's usually for like early adopters, and it kind of almost like self-manages itself to an extent, some of those communities that we're part of. Something that we love brands to do, so we'd encourage anyone that hasn't already to explore that as a kind of an addition to your social following and organic side of your business. Okay, cool. I think that's all really valuable. So let's like conclude the conversation. Now brands have done their competitive research, they've done their reviews research, they've audited their own creative folders to maybe find holes on what maybe they haven't tested or where maybe they've lent more towards so they can diversify. Because I think we all agree diversification is key when it comes to creative, not just going down one route. What do they do with all this information?
This is the fun part. So it's great too, because right now we're actually doing this for a new brand, and kind of how we do it. We go down all these rabbit holes, and you can do this with your brand. If you have multiple people on your team, if you have like a creative strategist, like let them own that creative angle where they're auditing your internal creative, they're auditing what you've done on your ad accounts, and they're auditing, what are your competitors doing? So what we do is we get all of these different people on our team to kind of go down their rabbit holes of their individual kind of lanes of kind of expertise. And then we all meet and we kind of have like a debrief, I would say. And what we do then is we just say, what are the patterns again that we're seeing on Google versus Facebook, versus this competitor stuff versus review data? What are the patterns that we're seeing? What are these like really big areas of opportunity? So we might see again, benefit number one isn't mentioned on any of the competitor sites at all. Like it's just completely missed. Or we might find these other like really cool specific use cases too, just again, aren't illustrated with competitor ads, aren't on competitor sites, isn't on our site. So we just kind of do all of this auditing to figure out like, what is that angle that we should take? Like, what is the initial first few tests that we should do? A lot of times for us, it's testing, top benefit, one versus 2 versus 3, like which one of those actually is going to be the needle driver. And a lot of times it's just static, because we can quickly do that on static ads and see how it works and go from there. But there's a lot of this like internal auditing that you kind of have to do with all of this too. Like I said, you have to look at your site, you have to look at just your messaging, your product pages. Does that line up or does it not? You can still test your ad creative and see if it still drives the needle, and you can still kind of like use the secondary data if your site's not converting and see like which ad is, again, getting people to click and like driving the most attention. And I would lean that direction, and then you can work on slowly testing that on your site. With us, it's kind of the nuanced part of this is we do all this research, and then it's sort of like, how do we put this all together to figure out like what's the biggest driver? And I think that's the biggest thing here is like noticing. And again, it's pretty easy most of the time. It's like benefit 1 versus 2 versus 3 is kind of how we do it. But you might also find some of these use cases like that one I mentioned, like a military guy that like got injured and retired and needed help and got this product or whatever it might have been. Is there more people like that? Do we want to test that too? Could that be an angle that we could leverage? A lot of times those other like use cases or one-offs that we might see, those I start testing when it comes to like really pushing and scaling an ad account. But first, what I like to do mainly is like benefit 1 versus benefit 2 versus benefit 3. Or if we see tons of people mentioning a pain point, which I would say like we've only had that case once where the pain points are mentioned and like drove results more than the benefits. I think a lot of times the benefits and the benefits of the benefits are what sells products. Unless if you're like one of those like pain remedy type of things, like a mattress that's really great or a pillow or things like that, then I might see that working, or a chair, even ergonomic things like that. But yeah, I would say main thing most of the time is like benefit 1 versus 2 versus 3. Get testing that, run with it that way, and then see if your site needs to be updated a bit more with copy and get into testing that. So that's kind of what I do mainly. But you might see too, or you might have this gut feeling that like, oh, like competitors are doing this, but I think this is a good thing, and we're seeing some review data on this or whatever too. Let's try testing that. So just think, what are the big needle drivers that levers that you can pull that's going to get you the results and like stand out and be a bit different. Sometimes it is similar to what competitors are doing. Sometimes it's very different too. So it's just like trying to, I would say, zoom out and see all the data that you're getting, and then figuring out what's the best move here from all this data that we have. Usually the data will kind of tell you, like I said, you might have 70% of people are mentioning this one thing. All right, let's probably go that direction and test it and see if it works.
Yeah, and I think we've just proven that this is like a never-ending process. Like we've only just scratched the surface of kind of what we do. And it does, when we first onboard a brand, when we tell them our research takes like 1 to 2 weeks, they're a bit surprised. But then when they see the result on the back end, they're like, well, yeah, no wonder. Yeah. You've discovered so much that maybe we hadn't even thought of. So I guess the message to brands is, no matter how well your ads are doing, there's always more research you can do. You're never too early in your journey to do research, or too late in your journey as a brand to do research. Just constantly be researching and testing, I think, is the moral of the story here. Get as nerdy as you possibly can into the data, but fundamentally, like, have conversations with your customers and actually hear it from the horse's mouth. Look at all the data, and don't be afraid to get some outside opinion on these sorts of things as well. Like if you need a team to help, or because I can understand, unless you have a team internally to do this for you as a brand owner, it can be somewhat hard to, I guess, truthfully audit your brand, your creative, your reviews, your website, for example. So don't be afraid to seek external help to get that, I guess, that research done, whether that be just a site audit or an email audit or review research, anything like that. So don't be, I guess, hesitant to reach out for support. Any final words?
Oh man, yeah, there's a lot here. I think, like I said, I think the main thing is just gather the data, see kind of what the data is showing you, and kind of go from there. And I think, yeah, that other part is, if you can get a third party, get them involved. I think it's easy to get married to your brand and just to lose sight of, like, even like some of our clients I've noticed, like main menu navigation starts getting messy because they just keep adding new products or something. And they don't really think about like the main menu navigation and how clear that is to a new visitor. A lot of like this kind of stuff where, like, yeah, definitely get like a third party person, even if it's a friend or someone, to go to your site and give them a task and tell them, like, talk out loud what they're thinking to get to whatever product that they're trying to buy or whatever. And I think that can help a lot. But yeah, the main part is just do the research, see where the data is kind of showing you and where it's kind of urging you to go, and then start testing that, see if it works. And if it does, then yeah, start doing some site updates, start leaning in that direction with creative. And that's why I love starting with kind of static image ads, is they're super cheap to test. And then when you start seeing, like, okay, that benefit number 1 maybe didn't work, but benefit 2 really did. All right, now we can start doing more of that budget on like video production or like UGC or performance creative people, because we know this angle is working and we're testing it really cheap up front with statics. And now we're more willing to invest on site changes and more video and things like that. Yeah. So it just helps you kind of save money up front by leveraging the research and using that testing up front.
I think we've got now tons of ideas for separate conversations off the back end of this. And this is just a useful tool, as I say, for I have no doubt brands do a lot of this already, but this is how we tackle research, at least initially. And it's a lot more comprehensive than what we've been able to distill in a 20-minute conversation. But it's super fun, super nerdy. It's part of the process that we really enjoy and is ultimately really valuable. So I think if anyone has any questions on this topic specifically, any brands kind of stuck to start or want some fresh ideas, just ping us, drop a comment below. We're more than happy to answer any of those questions. And then also, if there's anything else that you'd like us to cover around research, around creative, around copy, anything D2C, ads, e-commerce, brand related, also comment that below. We're more than happy to cover those topics too, no matter how nerdy or boring it sounds. We'll do our best to make it sound fun and exciting. But yeah, until next time, peace out.